Hey, you've just tuned into the Steel City Blitz Steelers podcast presented by DEK Roofing Incorporated of South Florida. And we're just starting and we're already having some fun, probably due to the fact we've already tapped into our adult libations here. Your Pittsburgh Steelers are 8-0 on the season, and it was not easy getting there, let me tell you. We will recap the events that took place in Jerry World in Dallas, Texas, or Arlington, more specifically. We'll talk a little bit about the effects of COVID and stuff right now, and what we can expect with those guys on that list, and of course, look ahead to the Cincinnati Bengals. And I'm just going to reiterate this because I saw very smart Steelers people trying to push this today, and I just disagree. It's not a rivalry. Stop it. It's not. Let the Bengals or Bungles people make it a rivalry.
It is a rivalry in the same way that a bug is a rival to a windshield.
Yes, absolutely. It just not. It's just not. So I don't even call it that. Anyway, Ben is here. Ian is here. Ben, go ahead. Give me your general overview of what took place in the 24-19 win over the Dallas Cowboys this past Sunday.
That was fucking ugly. But hey, they did enough. Thank goodness the Cowboys suck, because if they didn't, it would have been, seriously, I personally, like I mentioned in the last podcast, I never would have heard the end of it. To me, it came down to one thing, and the big problem was this. The lines got beat on both sides.
They did.
They didn't get any push. It looked to me like they were tired. Maybe that was the result of playing a few really physical games in a row, and this being their third road game, and then just being tired. But they looked bad. Seriously. I can't. David DeCastro looked pretty okay. The rest of the offensive line did not look good at all. Matt Filer, terrible in run blocking and pass pro. Marquise Pouncey, a step late in pass protection consistently all night. Run blocking was so-so. Chuks Okorafor was okay in pass pro. He was terrible in run blocking. Terrible. And Al, who's not the most gifted offensive lineman, was one of the better offensive linemen if you look at the five or six guys that played. So it just was not their night. They went out there and they played like shit.
Yeah.
Mike Tomlin obviously had no faith in his passing sub packages on defense. He just kept leaving, kept trying different combinations, and then he just finally was like, "Oh, screw it! I'm just going to leave Spillane out there with Vince, and we're just going to see where this goes." Linebackers covering wide receivers again.
Yeah, nightmares, absolute nightmares.
Yeah, it was just bad. Coverage was not great from the DBs, but it wasn't horrible. I thought Joe Hayden had a pretty nice game. I thought that Steven Nelson missed a bunch of tackles again. Mr. Lane missed a bunch of tackles again. Minka missed one. The surprise from the DBs, in my opinion, was Edmonds. He had a pretty decent game.
He's been steady. I hate to admit it. I'm glad to admit it. He's been steady.
Ever since that Denver game when we tore him to pieces because he was awful.
Yeah.
He's been much better. And maybe he was just figuring things out during that game and had to make enough mistakes to improve his game. Ben was okay, especially when he started calling his own plays in the fourth quarter.
Right.
But he's got to get that long ball together, man. And, I give James Conner an incomplete because you really can't judge him based upon that performance because he didn't have any room to run. And when he did, he was successful. So, it kind of is what it is. Wide receivers were okay. It seems like the one guy that I have some questions about because I expected so much more from him this season is Deontay Johnson. It just doesn't seem to me like he and Ben are exactly on the same page. And don't get me wrong, Ben's throwing the ball short sometimes.
He has.
Or throwing it inside, behind him, whatever. But it's just they just don't seem to be right on the same page. And that was the guy I was really looking forward to this season being his coming out party and him really establishing himself as a true number one wide receiver. And he hasn't. And some of it is injuries, granted.
Yeah, he has missed some time.
Juju's been hurt too, and he just goes out there and flat out balls. I mean, Juju's a number one receiver in the same way that Hines Ward was a number one receiver. He's not flashy, but he does all the dirty work. You need a first down, he gets it. You need something done, he does it. He doesn't complain. You got to have guys like that,
Yeah.
Aside from that, a sloppy game. But hey, another W. As like Tomlin says and has been saying, it's a lot more fun to learn lessons when you're winning than when you're losing.
It is, and it's a lot more fun for us, despite the 3 or 4 coronaries that come with it, to see us win too. Jesus, I tell you, Ian, your general thoughts on the game Sunday?
Well, Ben stole a lot of my thunder, but I'll try and add in a few things.
Go ahead and flash some lightning then.
Yeah. All right. Well, then I'll start where I usually do, which is Tony Corrente was terrible as usual, so no surprise there.
That would be the head officials, ladies and gentlemen.
Yes. The Steelers defense did a really good job of forcing the Cowboys to kick field goals. They didn't do a good job forcing punts, but they forced a lot of field goals. And the special teams were terrible. I mean, we just got killed on special teams.
Yeah. We did.
It was a horrible day for Danny Smith. There's no two ways about it.
Danny Smith sucks anyway, but
and I'll be the first to admit he had a pretty good start to the year. Special teams was solid, and then just oh my god, it just went awful from there. And
I will say this, Jordan Berry, maybe what he needed was to get fired and come back.
I really you're right, because he hit several punts that flipped the field, and
other than the first punt when he came back and got his job back, his very first punt was terrible.
Yep.
But since then, he has been money.
Well, since we're talking special teams here, Ben, what in the hell was going on with the PAT field goal team? Now, I'm going to preface this real quick by saying the NFL admitted they should have been flagging Tyrone Crawford because he was putting a hand on the center, and that's a no-no. It should have been flagged. That aside, this guy jumped over our O-line several times, blocked the kick, nearly blocked a couple others, and it forced Mike Tomlin to say, screw it, I'm going for it on 4th and 1 when I could have extended the lead to 8. What was going on there?
It looked to me on the play specifically. I mean, I tried to figure it out. I've watched that repeatedly. The guy he jumped over was Kevin Dotson.
Mm-hmm.
And it looked to me on the play in question when he jumped over Dotson. Yes, he put a hand on Dotson and he used him for leverage, which you're not allowed to do.
Right.
So yes, they should have called that. But regardless, it looked like Dotson didn't know the snap count.
Very slow off the ball.
He didn't move.
Yeah.
He didn't move at all. Even when Crawford was behind him, he didn't move. He just stood there like he was expecting a flag to be called, and it wasn't. So he just stood there. The flag isn't always going to be thrown. You gotta you gotta do what you can do, and try to prevent that guy from doing what he did. But yeah, I mean, if you count the kick where they had the penalty and had to re-kick it from 59,
that was
Claus missed 2 kicks.
Frankly. Yeah.
And then he hit it from 59. That was money. Oh my God. That was great. That might have been the highlight of the game for me.
Oh, he just pured it. Absolutely pured it. Let me ask you though because you have to know that Mike Tomlin and Danny Smith or either whatever were saying something to the officials. I mean, that's a fairly common rule to see a guy doing that. And so
it's always Tomlin. Tomlin
Right.
tells his players and his coaches not to talk to the officials, and when they do, he tells them to shut up. It's always Tomlin that goes through. And yes, Tomlin is vocal. He's not John Harbaugh whining vocal, but he's vocal.
So my question here is, do you think the officials were disagreeing with Tomlin and saying, no, he's not using anybody for leverage? I mean, because
they must have.
They have to have seen it that way.
That's the only thing I can think of. I mean, it was pretty quick.
Oh, yeah.
He kind of got it down to the point where he was like, if I do it like this, I'm getting away with it.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to keep doing it until they call it. He basically was daring them to call it.
Yes. Yep.
And yeah, he got away with it. And, that's the game sometimes, man.
Yes, it is.
And you got to be ready for that. And I'm sorry, it's not like Kevin Dotson is a little tiny guy. He's a big guy. He's a very strong guy. And had he been prepared for that move, he could have countered it.
I felt like I was in like Bill Murray Groundhog Day. Every time they line up for PAT, I'm like, here he comes again. I mean, you could just see it coming. And after a couple of times, I'm like, okay, he can't do that. It's illegal. Something's going on. And, it really did change the outcome of that game. And I'm not saying had we kicked the field goal to go up by 8, that it would have been a walk in the park. I'm not saying it would have at all, but man, what a different scenario that is than being up by 5. Ian, welcome back there. And, we're just rehashing the field goal PAT stuff, but question for you.
And
go ahead.
Let's not forget too. I mean, if you want to rehash the field goal PAT stuff, the Steelers went for it on a 4th and 1.
We talked about
at
that
the fringe of field goal range, right?
Yeah.
In the second quarter. No, in the second quarter.
Second quarter.
One at the end. Yeah. The one second quarter. They went for it on 4th down the 4th quarter, which was definitely in field goal range, and they missed 2 extra points. So I mean, that's 8 points off the board right there.
Yeah.
We won by 5. Theoretically, if the kicking game hadn't been dog crap, and let's not forget, Boswell broke the Steelers record for longest field goal ever.
59-yarder.
Yeah. But if the rest of the kicking game hadn't been dog crap, this would have been a 13-point victory instead of a 5-point victory.
I agree.
The game was dog crap.
Yes.
Yeah. It was bad.
But we still won, which is the most important thing. Yes.
But and I think what Tomlin talks about every single week now is the fact that he knows it as well as we know it, that this team is winning in spite of the fact they just aren't putting together complete games. And we haven't really seen this offense click since that first half against Tennessee. Maybe Tennessee,
the whole Cleveland game, but the first half against Tennessee too. Yeah.
And since then it's just been, okay, Ben, go 5 wide and figure it out. And
I wouldn't say that. I thought the second half versus the Ravens, they played very well.
It was better.
I thought they played really well, especially defensively. They played really well. They didn't. Okay, there's a caveat there. They allowed too many yards on the ground in the second half versus the Ravens. However, they were keying on Lamar. They were absolutely trying to minimize Lamar. It was not about the running game. They kind of went, you're going to get your yards on the ground. Whatever, it's fine. We're going to go after this guy. He's your weapon. We're going to try and minimize him. And I thought they contained him pretty well. I mean, like we talked about last week, he's had 2 games versus them. He's been sacked 9 times and he has 7 turnovers.
Mm-hmm.
The defense has done okay versus Lamar.
Right. And that'll segue me to one Mr. Garrett Gilbert. Well, Ian, let me start with you. Yeah. Why was Keith Butler, and I know what his rationale was, but why was Keith Butler just basically sitting back and not blitzing this guy?
He didn't want to give up the big play, basically. Was when you blitz, you expose your guys in coverage, and the Cowboys do have some really good receivers on the outside.
They do.
At least 3, maybe 4, depending on how you feel about Cedric Wilson, who is a highly decent number 4 receiver. But at least 3.
And he throws
really
the ball well too.
Yes.
Decent.
As far as number 4 receivers go, I mean, yes. Point made. So
who would you say the number 4 receiver is on the Steelers?
James Washington.
You think it's Washington?
Yeah.
All right. That's
fair. With everyone healthy, I think it's Washington.
Would you say Washington's a highly decent number 4 wide receiver?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah, I would.
I'm just trying to get a reference point.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to get a reference point.
Yeah.
Anyway, I apologize. Please.
No. So highly decent number 4 receiver basically means he could be a starter for a game or two if you needed him to. And I would say Washington definitely could. He's proven that, and Cedric Wilson for Dallas could as well. There are some other number 4 receivers out there for other teams that could not be a starter if you absolutely needed them to. Or could be, but there would be some drop off basically in the passing game. At any rate, Dallas has good receivers, and we didn't want to give up a big play to them. We wanted to make Gilbert beat us, not the receivers beat us with the ball in their hands. Gilbert actually did throw the ball down the field a bit more than I expected him to. I expected them to lean on their running game and throw a lot of short passes to try and minimize the pass rush, get the ball out of Gilbert's hands, and try and let the receivers win in space against our defensive backs. Get the ball in the hands of your playmakers.
Sure.
And playing zone against a team like that is basically an attempt to minimize that, keep the ball in front of you, kind of the old Dick LeBeau philosophy, make them pick their way down the field and hope that they're going to make a mistake at some point, which works against most quarterbacks in the league, doesn't work against your Tom Brady's, Drew Brees's, things like that. The quarterbacks that we always saw pick the Dick LeBeau defense apart because they could be efficient enough that they just wouldn't make a mistake the whole way down the field, whereas most quarterbacks will at some point. And that was where, really Gilbert threw one touchdown pass, and that was it. Most of the time, once the field got compressed and they got close to the red zone and the windows got tighter, he wasn't able to make the throws necessary to get them in the end zone, and they wound up kicking field goals instead of scoring touchdowns. So that was the philosophy behind it. If it had been me, I probably would have ditched that philosophy at halftime and just come after him and been like, who cares? We're already trailing, if you're going to beat us, but we're going to come after you and try and force some turnovers. But we forced some turnovers regardless. Mika had some huge plays in this game.
Yeah. And he did. That's 2 weeks in a row. He's made a play basically to end the game. He also had. Did they credit him with an interception on that ball that kind of bounced into his hands, or did they call that a fumble recovery?
He had both an interception and a fumble recovery.
Okay, so that's what they called it.
Had the interception in the end zone.
Right.
Yes.
Right.
And he had it was a fumble recovery on the other, because Sutton knocked it out of who dropped that? That was CeeDee Lamb, right? Yeah.
Yes.
Sutton knocked it out of his hand.
I was just curious what they called
Hell of a play there.
Yeah, let me just say, CeeDee Lamb has actually been a lot better than I expected him to be. I was not as high on him as some other people were coming out in the draft. And my knock on him was that he shrunk away from contact going over the middle, which I still think is true, but he's really impressed me this year. That kid's a baller. He can play.
Yeah, great athlete, long, lean, fast. But that was the knock. Would he be able to hang in there with the contact? And so far, so good. Ben, speaking of Ben, what do you have? 13 or 14 targets to Chase Claypool. Do you think that's just showing confidence in the kid, or is it a matter of that's just what the matchups were showing on Sunday?
No, they were trying to scheme him open. They were trying to scheme him open over the middle purposely, because in my opinion, what's going on is he's having problems getting off the press, which surprises me. And, that being the case, they tried to scheme him open a little bit over the middle of the field rather than putting him outside and try and take advantage of that because of his speed, which makes sense. You want to take advantage of that guy's speed. You want to put him out in space with the ball in his hands. There were a couple of instances where I thought he was going to have real long gains, and he fell down because the field in Dallas apparently sucks.
I noticed that too. A lot of guys falling down.
Yeah, well, don't forget, Emmanuel Sanders ripped up his ACL there too the 1 year.
Yeah, that's true.
Oh yeah, that's right. I forgot about that.
Jeez,
I forgot about that. Anyway, I thought it was I don't think it was the matchups. I thought it was done purposely, and they're trying to take advantage of his skill set, get him more involved. It's not just about. It's not so much about believing in him. It's about trying to get him more involved so he's a bigger threat.
Yeah,
in my opinion.
Yeah,
so that he draws more attention.
Yeah, I get it, and it's just fascinating on a week-to-week basis where who they do try to scheme open, who they look to target and stuff. And I mean, it could be different. And obviously, Ebron, I thought he'd be involved a little bit more, but he's still making some plays, obviously. So I do want to address one more thing, and Ian, I'll let you tackle this one first. I have enjoyed all of Juju's touchdown celebrations. I think he's creative, he's funny, but I'm not sure what in the hell he was thinking by trying to emulate the Terrell Owens run to the star and praise me type thing. And it's funny, Ben, you mentioned James Conner not really being much of a factor. His best play in this game might have been grabbing Juju and saying, whoa, just slow down here.
For sure.
Yeah. Ian, did you see what was happening at the time? Did you realize that's what Juju was doing when it was unfolding?
I didn't realize. So no, I didn't realize he was going for the star. But then when he actually did the celebration close to the sidelines, I was like, oh, that's what he was going to do.
Right.
But I think the Cowboys recognized it, and I think they took a penalty on that play for the guy knocking the ball out of his hand. Which actually, I want to talk about that too, because we chose to take that 15-yard penalty on the kickoff.
Yep.
We could have taken it on the extra point, and given how bad the kicking game was, we missed that extra point, or it got blocked. Like, we could have moved that kick half the distance closer and kicked it essentially like an old extra point from the 10-yard line.
Right.
So that was option one. Option two, and I can't believe I'm advocating for this, but we kicked off from midfield. We could have tried an onside kick there, and if the ball goes out of bounds, they're only going to get it on the 35, which if you kick it out of the end zone, they get it on the 25. So it's only a 10-yard difference there. Or if they recover it, the ball still has to go 10 yards, so they're still between the 35 and the 40.
If it had only gone 9 yards and they'd recovered it, it would have been better than the actual return that they got on us.
And that was the point. That was the final point I was going to make, was we tried to pooch it down there and pin them deep and wound up giving up a 70-yard return and almost went for a touchdown. So that was another just botched execution on special teams. I understand the philosophy of what they tried to do, but they had many other options they could have chosen there that probably would have been better off in the long run, shortening the extra point, and really with shortening the extra point, that gives Boswell the opportunity to try and kick the ball up higher in the air with a higher arc, to get it over any rush rather than having to kick it low and long. So could have shortened the extra point, could have tried an onside kick, or could have just booted it out of the end zone, or could have actually tackled the guy, back deep when they had him pinned, not giving up the sideline.
And they also could have gone for two and would have been closer as well.
They could have gone for two.
Granted, it's not much, but it's still closer. It's a good point about the kickoff, because they did end up returning that about 70 yards, and it kind of made the whole penalty a moot point. Ben, what was you going through your mind when you saw Juju? I at first I'm like, what's he doing? And then I kind of realized the more he went towards midfield, I'm like, oh God.
I was really Ian hit the nail on the head. Connor grabbing him and going, hey man, close game. You don't know what's going to happen here. Do not do this.
Yep.
Outstanding play on his part. I was a little surprised when I realized what he was going to do. I was a little surprised. I think he got a little carried away and was going to do something dumb. And frankly, he got lucky that he didn't pull it off. He really did.
Yep.
That was some dumb shit that would have stuck with him for the rest of his career.
And that's why I pointed it out on Twitter. And I said, and I called out immediately before anybody could say it. I just said it in my tweet. I said, look, if you say you're fine with it, then you better be fine when somebody, disgraces the terrible towel or does the same damn thing at Heinz Field.
At Heinz Field on the Steelers logo in the middle of the field.
Yep. Then I don't want to hear you bitch. Because him trying to do that, I think it was DeMarcus Lawrence that maybe knocked the ball away and got the penalty.
No, it was
it Jalen Smith?
No, who
Randy
was it?
Gregory.
It was Randy Gregory.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. And I thought, damn it all, I hate those Cowboys, but I'm going to tell you what, I would have done the same thing.
No, not only that, Randy Gregory did him a favor.
Big favor.
Juju may not have realized it in the moment, but he did him a favor because he slowed him down, and had he not, he might have run past James Conner and done it.
Yep. I couldn't agree more.
You should send him a Christmas card.
I'm sure Juju's got some kind of official Christmas card. So
with a Starbucks gift certificate, Starbucks card, gift card in it or something nice.
Well, down there in Texas is like a Luby's or something.
Yeah, maybe something like that. Or I don't know. What's that? What's that crappy place in Florida? Shoney's. Maybe get him some gift cards from Shoney's.
Remember when people were mad the Steelers didn't draft Randy Gregory? Speaking of,
yeah, that was funny.
Yes.
That was hilarious. That was hilarious. People were pissed off about that, and then they were pissed when they took Stephon Tuitt. I was like, "Are you kidding me? This guy should have taken him in the first round, and you got him in the second. Why are you bitching?"
Yep.
You are listening to the Steel City Blitz Steelers podcast presented by DEK Roofing Incorporated of South Florida. They serve the southern Palm Beach counties, whether it's commercial, residential, multifamily, or condos. Contact DEK Roofing today at dekroofing.com. Well, it finally came home to roost in Pittsburgh, guys. COVID has affected the black and gold, and I think we all kind of knew it was a matter of time. Vance McDonald did not practice Friday. He had some cold-like symptoms. He felt better Saturday, flew with the team, played in the game.
Symptoms on Friday.
Yeah. And
then he felt better on Saturday, so he flew.
He did.
What the hell?
We'll get into that. Let me just recap it. So he played about 20 snaps. He tested, and then he tested positive. And then, of course, they do the contact tracing, and his locker's right next to Ben's. So it was Ben, Hawkins, Samuels, and who was the fourth guy?
Vince Williams.
Vince, thank you, Vince. And so those guys have been on the COVID list all week. I mean, just go ahead and, Ian, how does this affect
I got
the
the first shot in the last one. Ben can go first.
Okay, all right.
Great. I want to ask you both a question anyway.
Surely.
Tomlin pointed out that the NFL sets the protocol, and you don't really have a choice. If a player tests negative, you got to play him. Okay. These are rules that were put in place, mandates, whatever you want to call it, put in place by the NFL and the NFLPA jointly. This is what they agreed upon. So there's no deviating. There's no choice involved here. However, there's no guidance for whether or not a guy has to travel with a team. Mm-hmm. They could have flown him down there private and flown him back private and avoided contact with the rest of the friggin' team. They could have done that at least. Now, I'm not saying that necessarily would have saved anybody, but it might have. Anybody else getting it. And yes, when they're on the plane, they're all masked up. But they're sitting next to each other, man. I mean, come on.
Doesn't common sense have to play into this at some point?
That's my feeling exactly. It's like, why? I mean, do you guys think he should have flown down there with the team?
No.
It's the same argument we made with Marlon Humphrey last week. Like, why in the world did the Ravens play Humphrey? And for the Ravens, it's a slightly different scenario because they didn't get on a plane. The Ravens were at home for that
True.
game. So,
Right.
This one, the Steelers put Vance on a plane with the rest of the team, which is putting him in an enclosed environment for multiple hours consecutively. And
Vance and Ben are tight, and
Yep.
This is why they kept Duck Hodges. You've got the quarterback position, and it's so important. And having enough depth there to be able to deal with something like this is something that Tomlin, thank goodness, had the foresight to plan for and think, okay, this is a really important position. I don't really have enough snaps for 4 guys in practice, but I have too many snaps for 2 guys. So if something happens and one of these guys goes down, I need another guy, and I got to have a quarterback. I got it.
Yeah.
I can't just, it's not like when you've got a linebacker down, you can insert a strong safety there and have him play. It's not like that.
Nope.
So I need to have an extra arm. I just, getting back to Vance, and Ben being tight,
They locker right next to each other.
They should. It isn't just that. They sit next to each other on a plane, man.
Yeah.
Come on. They hang out. They're buddies. You gotta, like you just pointed out, have some common sense here. This is your most valuable player. Without him, you are sunk. Yeah. Without him, you are sunk. You got to protect him. His buddy comes in. He's got flu-like symptoms. Granted, you've got rules in place. You can't just say, well, you can't play because he tested negative. Can't be around anybody. You got to go home and self-isolate. You can't say that. So you got to bring him along. But again, there's no guidance in terms of how he travels, just that he is available to play and that he may play. They could have – Tomlin could have made him inactive. He just had to do it for football reasons.
Well, and I just want to clarify that in any other year that's not 2020, I have no problem if Vance says, hey, I wasn't feeling well, flu-like symptoms, I feel better. Okay, great. But this is 2020 in the middle of a pandemic. The same type of symptoms are what, also is part of a COVID thing. So that's what I mean by the common sense.
And McFarland was sick today.
Yeah. And I have every expectation. It would not shock me one bit if he ends up with something as well. Ian, I know you've been waiting patiently. Go ahead and jump in on this.
So the one other thing I'll add is that the Steelers are the only NFL team that share their facilities with a college team, and Pitt, who they share with, just suspended football activities today because of because of COVID protocols. So I don't know exactly what that means. And their Pitt's game against Georgia Tech, which was supposed to be on Saturday, got postponed until December. So I don't know exactly what that means as far as the facility. And the other thing to remember, too, that sort of works in the Steelers' favor a little bit here, is that they weren't in the facility practicing all last week because of what happened with the Ravens with Marlon Humphrey.
Right.
They did do a lot of virtual meetings and stuff before the trip to Dallas. Now that doesn't cancel out 3.5 hours on a plane together. But it does limit some contact a little bit. I would imagine it's been similar this week, especially since they had a positive case in house, that they've been doing a lot of virtual stuff.
Yeah.
So and actually I kind of wondered if that was a little bit of why they looked so sloppy coming out of the gate, just because they had been doing virtual meetings and hadn't been doing in-person sessions all week. And so we'll see if that plays out this week too against the Bengals, who are coming off a bye week. Let's not forget that, they'll be more rested and healthy, and we're coming off of 3 straight road games.
And just to point out,
you just hear a little Pittsburgh ease there out of Ian. I thought I could vaguely hear Bengals, not Bengals.
It's very possible, I drop it every now and then.
And you're not even drinking right now.
Yes, I am.
Are you? Okay, that's why. Never mind.
Oh, shoot! I was trying to say, but yeah, and I did want to point out.
All right.
Oh, shit, yeah. I did want to point out that the Bengals are the second consecutive division opponent the Steelers will play coming off of the bye.
What the fuck is that bullshit about?
Why does that happen to us every year? Have you noticed that? We always get hosed on that.
And granted, I mean, we weren't supposed to play the Ravens after their bye.
Right.
But still, this is bullshit.
Yep. I don't like it. All right. So the Steelers are in this situation. Those four players have to have negative tests all week. And what is it? I believe 4 or 5 negative tests they have to have in a row.
5 days in a row.
5 days in a row.
And
Ben
could come back Saturday at the earliest, which actually, the other side of it is him not practicing all week might be good for his banged up knees.
Yeah, not the end of the world.
That his knee injury looked bad. I mean,
I thought it was way worse. Yeah, I did too.
Halftime in Dallas.
I was stunned to see him walking the way he was when he was coming back down the tunnel in the second half. I'm like, you got to be kidding me. I thought for sure he had some worse damage there, but thank God he didn't. Okay, guys, this is our first look at Heisman Trophy winner Joe Burrow and the Bengals. They're 2-5-1. They've been in a lot of games. They're scoring pretty well. Their defense is not good at all, but might I mention we knew that about Dallas last week too, and that didn't really help.
So what are you saying?
Well, what I'm saying is I'll tell you what, I'm not taking this game for granted at all. Just simply because. But what do we expect to see Keith Butler do defensively this week against the rookie QB?
I think also you got to say don't take this game lightly because the Bengals just beat Tennessee too, who's a pretty darn good team. So
very good. Yep.
The Bengals are getting better with each week. They do have. You're right. They have defensive problems, but Joe Burrow is essentially leading the league in pass attempts per game. Some of that's game script that they're trailing so much he has to throw, but some of it is just that they're just throwing him out there and literally letting him chuck the ball around the yard.
Right.
There's a long-term strategy there, though. It's just like with Peyton Manning when he was a rookie.
Yeah.
It's exactly the same.
Yes.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah.
Trial by fire, baptism by fire, however you want to put it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, but that baptism by fire has sort of never worked for Cleveland either. But they're,
And now, isn't Burrow also the most hit quarterback in the league, or at least the most pressured?
I believe so. Yeah, because their line is dog crap.
But I think they're counting that by total pressures, and he's also, as Ian has pointed out, leading the league in total attempts, which to me is just crazy.
Yeah, I don't get that either.
He's on track right now for 660 attempts. The NFL is crazy right now with the passing game. It's absolutely batshit.
And I like Joe Mixon. I know he's been hurt, but I like Joe Mixon, and Giovanni Bernard in certain ways is a decent player
Mixon's
too.
But fucking scumbag.
Well, I'm not saying he's not. Nobody's disagreeing with that, but I think he's performed well as a running back. I'm not talking about him as a person. But yeah, I don't know why they haven't tried to run the ball a little bit more. And speaking of that too, and it's something I wanted to mention earlier. Tyson Alalu and Mike Hilton, how much has that affected the run defense?
A lot.
Yeah.
A lot. I mean, and Devin Bush, too. I mean, don't forget, we basically lost 3 starters. Yep. We essentially lost 3 starters in the span of, a couple quarters. But
let's
yes.
Just real quick, I want to make sure we mention this. Robert Spillane in the run game has been a really pleasant surprise. He really has. He diagnoses plays quickly, comes downhill fast, hits like a truck.
He does.
In the run game, Spillane has been a really pleasant surprise. So I got to give him props. I really do.
I think he's a smart player. I
agree. And a lot more valuable than I gave him credit for coming into the season. A lot more.
No, I agree. And Alalu, what was his status today? Another limited practice?
He was limited again, yeah.
Okay.
And Hilton took a step back. He full practice yesterday. He was limited today, so kind of hard to say.
Yeah.
The Steelers usually practice in pads on Wednesday.
Right. Yes.
So if they practice in pads, and they don't always practice in pads at all during the course of the week. So
right. So what do you guys think Butler does? Because we saw last week he decided to play coverage against a guy making his first career start, and now he's playing a rookie who's seen a lot of NFL action so far in his first halves of the season. What does Butler dial up here?
I think he pressures him.
I think it depends if Hilton's available. Because if Hilton's available, that changes the whole scheme. They have not blitzed Cam Sutton off the slot nearly as much as they blitzed Hilton.
They've actually used Edmonds a little bit.
Yeah, that's
smart.
Burrow has the second most sacks in the league. Carson Wentz has been sacked 32 times, and Burrow's been sacked 28. And next is Daniel Jones, also at 28. So, two of those top three guys have played the Steelers defense already and got sacked a bunch by them. So I would not be surprised if we came out trying to play coverage just to keep them in front of us a little bit, because they use Tyler Boyd a lot out of the slot. T. Higgins has actually come along pretty nicely for them.
Targeted a lot for them. Yeah,
as an outside receiver, developed a lot fast. He's another guy who's been better than I thought he would be. He's a big dude coming out of Clemson, but I didn't think he just had the all-around polish that he's shown so far this year. I thought he was a bit more raw, but he's really developed into something nice for them. He's their second leading receiver, actually. AJ Green's been targeted more, but Higgins has more receptions and more yards than Green has. So, I think they might see if the front four or front five, however you want to look at it, can just win on their own, basically, against Cincinnati's terrible line. And if they can do that and you can drop 7 and get pressure with 4, then you're set. I mean, you're in the captain's seat then.
For sure.
But if they have to bring pressure, they probably will too. That said, I think they're also going to mix in Avery Williamson this week. He had no snaps last week on defense, and I think that's gonna help a lot, especially in the run defense, where there were a few plays against Dallas, especially, and it happened against Baltimore too, but against Dallas especially, where I was like, yeah, Devin Bush would have got there, and Spillane or Vince Williams.
There were a few moments like that,
especially on the outside runs. And I was like, yeah, Devin Bush would have got there, and that big difference between a 20-yard run and a 6-yard run. So hopefully Williamson's not Devin Bush, but Williamson is, I think, better than Spillane, even though Spillane, like Ben has said, and I completely agree with him, has been a very pleasant surprise.
Yeah. Ben, before we switch to the other side of the ball, what do you think Butler does this week? You sound like you're thinking more pressure.
I think more pressure because you're talking about a rookie quarterback. Garrett Gilbert's 31. He's been around for a while.
He has.
He's seen a lot. And, has some professional playing experience, extended professional playing experience in the AAF. So he, and granted, it's the minor leagues of the professional leagues, but he has a better sense, a better feel for the game. I mean, you saw him hit receivers that were open when he was given enough time to do so. Burrow is a more gifted passer than Gilbert.
Sure.
Is. I mean, far more gifted. And I think if you give him time and you give him a spot to sit on, he's going to hit those guys. And he doesn't have very good receivers, granted, and he doesn't have a very good line. So maybe they will just go with a 4-man rush. But I tend to believe that they're probably going to go with more blitzing this week than they did last anyway. Because if you send 5 guys, you still have 6.
Yeah.
You guys still have 6 back there. You can play cover 1. You can play zone. You can play man 2. You can do all kinds of different things, just kind of depending on what the sets are in front of you, and make it work. So I'm not thinking that it's necessarily going to be a set plan. I think it'll probably be a mix, but I would expect a little more pressure this week than last. Is all.
So, yeah, let me switch over to the other side of the ball here. What do you need to see besides the obvious, which is score some touchdowns, but especially early? What are you looking for from this offense to make you, kind of sit back in your chair and go, okay, this is what I expect to see? What do you need to see this week?
I would really like to see them be better in the running game. The Bengals have the 29th ranked run defense in the league. They're not good against the run. Granted, we talked last week about how bad Dallas was against the run, but we've been very inconsistent running the ball.
The Bengals are number 32 in average yards per carry.
That is true. They are. They're giving up 5.2 yards per carry.
Oh my!
They are terrible.
Yes. That said, something Dallas did was they basically they stacked the line early and tried to force Ben to beat us over the top. Mm-hmm. And Cincinnati has played like that in the past. Granted, that was under Marvin Lewis with other defensive coordinators and things like that. But I mean, Cincinnati's old philosophy back when they were somewhat competitive for postseason berths, not for winning playoff games because they haven't done that in 30 years, but for postseason berths, was that they played cover 2 against us. Actually, they played cover 2 with man underneath, and basically they played man 2 and press on the outside, so you couldn't throw the quick stuff, and the cover 2 was taking away the deep stuff, and guys like Antonio Brown really struggled against the Bengals for a long time because of that scheme. That they couldn't get over the top on him, but the place to hit him was at the making over the middle because their linebackers couldn't cover, and because Fontez Burfict had nothing in his head to concuss, even though he got multiple concussions somehow. I don't know how that's medically
allegedly,
yes. That being said, this Bengals front seven is really bad. They just let Carlos Dunlap walk, who was a really good player for them for a long time. They picked up Tack McKinley on waivers.
They did? I didn't catch that.
They did. Yes, they did. So they have him, but he's nowhere near as good as Dunlap.
And he'll have to sit anyway, doesn't he? He's not going to play because of doesn't he have to sit for 5 days or something like that because of COVID?
And when they picked him up.
Yeah, I'm not sure when they signed him.
It was a waiver acquisition, so they basically got him right away, like the next day.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
When you switch teams, it doesn't matter the reason. You have to sit for 5 days. That's the protocol.
Right. I just didn't know when they made it official.
Yeah. So, but that being said, I think the way to approach this game is to go back to the philosophy that worked against Cleveland and somewhat worked against Tennessee, which was kind of the old Bill Cowher philosophy of throw early to get the lead and then run on them to just grind out the clock and take it home. And that's where you can have more success, because against Dallas, we tried to come out running and they were stacking the box on us. And then we had to throw to catch up, and it basically took the running game out of it. Whereas if you come out throwing, it switches the whole game plan up. And the Steelers do more often come out throwing at home. It seems like when they play on the road, they don't come out throwing very often. They usually try and come out running on the road, and some of that may be to try and minimize the crowd noise on the road. But this year, that's kind of weird because there is no crowd noise.
There is no crowd noise,
which also may be kind of why our no huddle and the whole Ben calling plays thing has been so effective on the road, because there's no crowd noise and he can just yell over to his receivers and they can hear him.
There are going to be fans in Hines this week, right?
I believe there are. Yes.
Yeah, a whopping 4,800 or something.
Yeah. It still kills me. I think I was part of the smallest crowd ever at Heinz Field for a Steelers game. So I guess
better caveat that for a Steelers game, because I think Pitts had some
right. So Ben, what do you think about this Steelers offense? Do you run the ball? Do you throw the ball? What do you do here against the Bengals?
I agree with Ian in as much as you get out there and you set up an efficient passing game where you're throwing short to intermediate routes. You're moving the ball down the field. You're moving the chains. You're taking the wind out of the defense's sails, making them feel like, hey, they're going to lose another game against the Steelers. The Bengals are not a terrible passing defense, but they're not good. They are, I don't know, they're middle of the field, the middle of the pack, if you will, as far as passing defense goes in terms of they're allowing an opposing passer rating of 94.4, which is, not good, but the Steelers, just for reference, their opposing passer rating is 79.7, which is pretty good. But they're susceptible. Let's just put it that way.
They are.
They don't have a great pass rush. They don't have great linebackers. Their DBs are slightly better. I just, looking at it from a global perspective, that's the way I would attack them. And then, if you get a lead, they can't defend the run. You just start running the ball against them, and, you keep moving the chains that way and eating the clock. And it's boring.
I'll take it all day.
I'll take it all day too. It's it's early to mid 2000s football that we used to love.
Yeah.
When Bettis would just grind the clock, grind it out. It's boring to watch, but it guarantees you a win, and that's what I expect to see if they get an early lead. Yeah.
And let's not forget also
go ahead, Ian.
that Cincinnati scored 30 points 4 times in 8 games so far this year. So their offense can score. It's
that's what I was pointing out. Yep.
Yeah, their defense has also given up 30 plus points 3 times. So those times that they've scored 30 plus, they've scored 30 plus 4 times and only won 2 of them. So
twice they scored 30 points plus against the Browns twice. So
that is true.
Let's take that into consideration when we talk about how many times they've scored 30 plus. And
that's a fair point.
Yeah.
And one was against Jacksonville, who was similar.
One was against Jacksonville, who's really not good either.
Well, they're next up on the plate. They're on deck, if you will. Okay, so let's get to the final thoughts and a prediction here. Ben, go ahead.
Are we done already?
Yeah, we've been on here an hour, man.
Wow.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I think you should leave the beginning intact because I think that Lawrence Welk opening was fantastic. The Steelers are favored by 7.5. I don't see them covering again this week.
No.
You people who bet the lines. I see kind of a lower scoring affair. And maybe I'll be wrong, but I just don't. I think this team was tired last week, and they're going to kind of pace themselves. And Steelers 27, Bengals 20.
Okay, 7-point game. All right, Ian, you're up.
Oh boy, I'm gonna go. I mean, Cincinnati's defense is so bad, so bad. I'm gonna go Steelers 31-28. I know 31-27. 31-27. We'll hold them to field goals.
Wow, that's a lot of points.
That's a lot of points for the Bengals. All right.
Okay. All right.
The Bengals put 31 against Tennessee. And they're coming off a bye week. Mixon's healthy now.
I just saw that as a fluke. Well, Mixon didn't practice yesterday.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's still dealing with a foot. I don't think he's 100%, but
neither do I.
I'm worried about this game, and I'm worried because I don't know what the status of Ben is.
Ben doesn't play. It's a totally different story.
Well, it is, and I'm also
we bring back Cordell.
Well, hey, Kent Graham. I'm also just not 100% sure about his knees either. But that being said, I'm just going to go ahead and assume Ben is Ben, and I think it's going to be around like a 24-20 kind of a Steelers win.
Yeah, Mixon hasn't practiced the last 2 days, man.
Well, maybe he's not going then. I thought he was going to be ready, but that's
they've got some AJ Ryan behind him, but he's more of a power back than anything else.
Yeah. I think we'll see him and Bernard and
God, fucking Bernard. Oh,
I know.
Steelers should have just signed him so they don't have to deal with him anymore. You guys know I'm right.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. Anyway, thanks for listening to the Steel City Blitz Steelers podcast presented by DEK Roofing Incorporated of South Florida. Make sure you check out the website, steelcityblitz.com, at Facebook, and, of course, on Twitter at SC Blitz. And I think that'll do it for us tonight. So for Ben and Ian, this is Steel Dad signing off. And, hey, go Steelers.
Ravens suck.